The bright lights shone on Oprah Winfrey as she took center stage at the National Policy Forum. Dressed in an elegant purple pantsuit, she radiated her signature confidence. The audience, filled with policy experts, media figures, and political leaders, waited attentively as America's most admired talk show host prepared to deliver her highly publicized lecture on the nation's moral crisis. Behind the curtain, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stood composed in her navy blue suit, scrolling through her phone with quiet focus. Her staff had just forwarded the advanced transcript of Oprah's speech shared with select media outlets. As Crockett read through it, anger began to rise. Oprah was about to distort her voting record and misrepresent her policy stance. Just minutes earlier, the moderator had introduced Winfrey with glowing admiration, the voice of a generation, a self-made billionaire who understands America's struggles. The audience erupted in applause as Oprah began. "Our leaders have failed us," Oprah declared, her voice firm and resonant. "Representatives like Jasmine Crockett push policies that divide rather than unite." Backstage, Crockett's eyes narrowed at the monitor. Her press secretary leaned in, whispering, "We didn't know she was going to call you out directly." Crockett nodded calmly. "It's fine," she said. "I came prepared." This wasn't just another policy event. It was about to become the defining moment when Jasmine Crockett, the rising Texas congresswoman, reminded Oprah Winfrey that fame doesn't grant immunity from accountability. What followed would leave the audience stunned and reshape both women's public images for years to come. Before we continue with this remarkable exchange, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more political moments the mainstream outlets often overlook. The convention hall buzzed with anticipation. Smartphones were raised, cameras rolling, every eye fixed on Oprah. For decades, she had been America's trusted voice of empathy, a billionaire icon whose journey from poverty to prominence inspired millions. But today was different. She wasn't here to give away cars or host celebrity interviews. Her message focused on what she called the political division tearing America apart. Winfrey paced the stage with practiced ease, her tone carrying the emotional weight that made her a household name. "I've spent my life listening to Americans from every background," she began, "and what I hear now worries me deeply. Politicians like Representative Crockett have abandoned moderation. They speak in extremes, demonize those who disagree, and refuse to accept accountability." Large screens displayed edited clips from Crockett's congressional hearings, selectively framed to portray her passionate advocacy as aggressive and combative. The audience, made up mostly of Winfrey supporters and centrist policy makers, nodded in quiet agreement. "Just last month," Oprah continued, shaking her head, "Representative Crockett blocked a bipartisan bill designed to help working families simply because it didn't meet her demands. This all-or-nothing attitude is why Washington can't move forward." Backstage, Jasmine Crockett stood composed but visibly tense. At 44, she had already earned a formidable reputation as an attorney and civil rights advocate long before entering Congress. A Harvard law graduate, she had fought tirelessly in Texas courtrooms for voting rights and against systemic injustice. For her, politics wasn't ambition, it was service. Her chief of staff handed her a tablet displaying social media posts already trending under Oprah wisdom. "They've been setting this up for weeks," he whispered. "Word is Oprah hasn't even read the bill she's criticizing." Crockett opened the actual legislation on her phone. "She's either deliberately twisting the facts or hasn't done her homework," Crockett said evenly, despite her frustration. That bill contained a hidden amendment that would have removed protections for the most vulnerable communities. She looked up, resolute. "We didn't oppose aid for families. We opposed the fine print that would have taken it away." A production assistant approached cautiously, signaling that it was almost her turn to take the stage. "Congresswoman, you'll be on in 3 minutes," her aide reminded her. "Ms. Winfrey's team has also requested that you stick to the pre-approved questions." Crockett gave a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, they did." She adjusted her blazer and glanced at her reflection in a nearby mirror. This wasn't just about defending her record anymore. It was about standing up against the growing trend of celebrities oversimplifying complex political issues without understanding their real-world consequences. "The audience isn't prepared for you," her press secretary warned. "Neither is Oprah," Crockett replied calmly, sliding her phone into her pocket. On it was screenshots of Winfrey's past contradictory statements. "They're all about to see that sound bites and edited clips can't compete with facts and evidence." As the moderator announced her name, Jasmine Crockett took a steady breath. The moment carried enormous weight. This wasn't just personal. It was about protecting integrity in a political climate increasingly shaped by celebrity, influence, and media distortion. The audience's applause was noticeably restrained as Crockett stepped onto the stage with composed confidence. Oprah greeted her with a warm but calculated smile. The contrast was unmistakable. Winfrey with her global brand and polished image. Crockett with her legal precision and unflinching candor. "Representative Crockett, thank you for being here." Oprah began, gesturing toward the chair across from her. "I think we can agree that finding common ground is essential in today's divided world." Crockett sat down, adjusting her microphone deliberately. "Thank you, Ms. Winfrey. I agree. Common ground matters as long as it's based on truth, not misrepresentation." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the differential tone guests usually took with Oprah. Winfrey tilted her head slightly, her expression a blend of concern and curiosity. "It sounds like you're on the defensive before we've even started. Is that part of the problem with compromise in Congress?" The tension in the room thickened. Crockett didn't flinch. "I'm not defensive, Miss Winfrey. I'm being direct. Your viewers deserve clarity about the claims you made before I came on." Turning to the audience, she continued. "Miss Winfrey implied that I blocked a bipartisan bill designed to help working families. What she didn't mention is that the bill included an amendment cutting childcare subsidies for over 300,000 families to fund corporate tax breaks." Oprah's smile faltered as she tried to steer the discussion back. "Well, politics often involves compromise, doesn't it? Compromise shouldn't mean sacrificing those who need help the most." Crockett replied firmly but calmly. "And perhaps your audience should also know that your own production company stood to benefit from those same tax breaks." A sharp gasp echoed through the audience. The moderator quickly stepped in. "Maybe we should." "No," Crockett interrupted, raising a hand. "Transparency matters." Miss Winfrey framed this as a discussion on American values, but failed to reveal her financial stake in the policies she was supporting. The large screens behind them, meant to show only pre-approved clips, unexpectedly displayed Crockett's own slides, financial records showing Oprah's investments in companies that would profit from the proposed legislation. Backstage, Crockett's digital team had bypassed the event's planned visuals. The technical director rushed to restore the original feed, but it was too late. The audience had already seen the apparent conflict of interest. Winfrey's usual calm slipped momentarily. "This is highly inappropriate," she said firmly. "We're here for a civil conversation about unity, not accusations." "Civil doesn't mean avoiding the truth," Crockett replied, her tone gaining power. "And unity starts with honesty about who benefits from these policies." The moderator, visibly unsettled, tried to steer things back on track. "Let's discuss the broader issue of political division," they suggested. "Gladly," Crockett said, taking out her phone. "I have some quotes from Miss Winfrey that illustrate the problem." She displayed a collection of Winfrey's conflicting statements about compromise and corporate accountability. From offstage, Oprah's team gestured frantically for her to stop. A producer whispered to the moderator, who quickly announced, "We'll take a short break." "Are we breaking because I'm presenting facts?" Crockett asked, arching a brow. Her comment was caught on mic before the feed was cut, rippling through the uneasy crowd. As the lights rose for an unplanned intermission, social media erupted. Hashtags like "Crockett exposes Oprah" trended instantly. Clips of the confrontation spread rapidly, dividing audiences between shock at Oprah being challenged and respect for Crockett's composure. Backstage, Oprah's team went into crisis mode. "This isn't what we agreed on," her publicist snapped at the organizer. She was supposed to follow the approved topics. Meanwhile, Crockett calmly sipped water in her dressing room, scanning her notes. "They'll try to cut my mic," she said to her staff. "Make sure Plan B is ready." When the break ended, the atmosphere had completely shifted. Viewers who came for Oprah's trademark inspiration were now bracing for a political face-off. As cameras rolled again, Oprah's team handed out a revised format: structured questions, 2-minute answers, no interruptions. It was clear damage control, but Crockett came prepared. She carried a stack of printed evidence and began handing it to reporters in the front row. "What are you doing?" Oprah asked, her mic accidentally live. Crockett looked her in the eye, ensuring the truth isn't edited out. The red lights flicked on, and the tension escalated. The moderator, tense, tried to regain order with a neutral question about infrastructure spending, but the moment had changed everything. Millions of viewers were now watching something rare: Oprah Winfrey being directly challenged. "Before we continue," Crockett said calmly, "we need to clear the air. Ms. Winfrey made false claims about my voting record, and the audience deserves clarity. Oprah's once warm smile faded. I think we've moved past that point, Congresswoman. Let's focus on solutions. Accountability isn't hostility, Crockett replied evenly. Solutions built on falsehoods help no one. She turned toward the audience. I deeply respect Ms. Winfrey's achievements. Her journey from poverty to global influence is inspiring, but with influence comes responsibility. Especially when advocating policies that affect millions. A soft murmur of agreement spread through the hall. Sensing the shift, Winfrey tried to regain control with her familiar emotional tone. What Americans want, she began, is for leaders to rise above division and work together. I've spoken with presidents and everyday citizens alike, and what I've learned is, with all due respect, Crockett cut in. What Americans truly want is the truth. She lifted a document from her folder and held it high for everyone to see. This is the actual wording of the bill you've criticized me for opposing. Section 43 specifically removed healthcare provisions that supported vulnerable communities, while Section 119 introduced new tax benefits for major media corporations, including your own. The display behind them lit up, revealing the highlighted portions of the legislation. Crockett continued, your company, Harpo Productions, would have gained approximately $247 million in tax advantages from this clause. Yet you portrayed my opposition as if I were denying aid to working families. The audience reacted immediately. A wave of gasps followed by murmurs of disbelief spreading through the crowd. Oprah's expression shifted from surprise to irritation, before settling into a composed but strained smile. I think you're missing the broader perspective, Congresswoman. Winfrey replied, regaining her composure. Policy discussions demand nuance, not I couldn't agree more about nuance, Crockett interjected respectfully but firmly. Which is why I found your earlier remarks so surprising. They lacked that very balance. She lifted her phone. May I replay your statement for clarity? Without waiting for approval, Crockett pressed play. Oprah's voice echoed through the hall. Politicians like Representative Crockett have abandoned moderation. They speak in absolutes, vilify their opponents, and refuse to admit when they're wrong. Crockett looked directly at Winfrey. That doesn't sound nuanced, Miss Winfrey. It sounds like the very divisive rhetoric you say you oppose. The moderator tried to intervene, but Crockett continued calmly. Here's my main concern. With a platform as vast as yours, every statement carries weight. When those statements lack context or factual accuracy, they don't just affect reputations. They misinform citizens about how their government truly operates. The once enthusiastic audience had fallen silent, their attention now fixed entirely on the exchange. Recognizing the shift in tone, Winfrey tried to pivot to her strength, emotional connection. I understand your frustration, Congresswoman. Perhaps we began on the wrong note, she said smoothly. What I truly want is to understand your vision. Please explain why you believe your approach is right for America. It was a classic Oprah maneuver, turning confrontation into conversation. But Crockett wasn't seeking an emotional moment. I appreciate that, Miss Winfrey. But this isn't about our feelings. It's about accuracy, Crockett said, addressing the audience directly. When public figures make political statements, they have an obligation to be well-informed. She continued. The bill in question would indeed help some working families, but at a cost to others. It proposed funding new programs by cutting existing ones that serve our most vulnerable populations. After a brief pause, she delivered her most striking point. And here's what your audience may not know. Just 3 weeks before you publicly supported this bill, your investment group acquired substantial shares in companies that stand to benefit directly from these changes. Crockett held up financial disclosure documents with key sections highlighted. These are the same companies sponsoring this very forum. The room erupted. Journalists in the front row snapped photos of the documents Crockett had distributed earlier. Oprah's staff rushed from backstage, signaling urgently to the crew. This is inappropriate and potentially lealist. Winfrey protested, her voice tense as the cameras continued to flash. Real frustration began to show through her calm demeanor. You're making serious claims based on loose connections, Oprah said firmly. These are all public records. Miss Winfrey, Crockett replied evenly. See filings, congressional records, and your own public statements. Everything I've shared is verifiable. The moderator, visibly tense, tried to call for another break, but Crockett continued. The American people deserve leaders who make decisions based on policy outcomes, not popularity. And they deserve media figures who research before shaping public opinion. Turning directly to the camera, she added, dialogue matters, accountability matters, and most of all, Facts matter. The production director, reacting to frantic signals from Oprah's team, abruptly cut to an unscheduled commercial break. But the moment had already gone viral. The live stream had captured everything. Clips spread rapidly across social platforms under hashtags like Crockett Challenge and Knocks Oprah Accountable, trending nationwide. In under 15 minutes, Jasmine Crockett had achieved what few ever had. She had confronted Oprah Winfrey on her own platform, armed with evidence that couldn't be ignored. The balance of power hadn't just shifted. It had completely flipped. During the prolonged break, the atmosphere backstage was tense. Oprah's advisors huddled around her, whispering urgent strategies. Just a few feet away, Crockett stood alone, calmly reviewing her notes as though this were just another congressional session. When the production team announced a 2-minute countdown to resume, anticipation filled the studio. Viewers waited to see how America's most experienced interviewer would respond to being outmaneuvered on her own stage. When the broadcast returned, Oprah had clearly regained her composure. Decades of media expertise guided her next move. Before we continue, she began in a steady voice. I'd like to acknowledge something important. Congresswoman Crockett has raised legitimate points about the accuracy of some statements I made earlier. Turning toward Crockett, Oprah added, while we may view the impact of this legislation differently, I should have been more specific about certain provisions in the bill. It wasn't a full apology, but the partial concession stunned the audience. Oprah Winfrey rarely yielded. Crockett accepted graciously. Thank you for that clarification, Miss Winfrey. I believe we both want what's best for the American people, even if our approaches differ. The remaining 40 minutes unfolded with a far more balanced and thoughtful tone. Detailed, respectful, and focused on substance. Yet, the damage to Oprah's long-standing image of being unchallengeable was undeniable. As the cameras went off, the true story began taking shape online. Within hours, NAR's Crockett checkmate was the nation's top trending topic. Clips highlighting the moment Crockett presented financial documents, and Oprah's reaction spread rapidly. Conservative outlets celebrated with headlines like, Congresswoman brings receipts, leaves Oprah speechless, and Crockett exposes celebrity politics. Surprisingly, progressive outlets also echoed the moment, framing it as a valuable lesson in media accountability and the importance of preparation when public figures weigh in on policy. Political analysts across the spectrum weighed in. On CNN, senior correspondent Jessica Winters remarked, what we saw today wasn't just a politician defending her record. It was a direct challenge to the way celebrity influence shapes public debate in America. Congresswoman Crockett came equipped with data, documents, and facts, turning what could have been an emotional exchange into a fact-driven discussion. Her fellow panelist Marcus Johnson agreed. Oprah has interviewed world leaders and industry giants, but I've never seen her this unprepared for a guest. The question now is what this means for her influence moving forward. By nightfall, the story had moved beyond politics. It had entered mainstream entertainment, becoming one of the most talked about moments of the year. News outlets quickly picked up the story with one segment, titled Oprah's Toughest Interview Yet. Entertainment Tonight even brought in body language experts to break down the exchange moment by moment. Inside Harpo Productions, reports described a tense mood as Oprah and her team held an urgent damage control meeting. An insider told Page 6, she's taking this very personally. In nearly 4 decades of broadcasting, Oprah has never been blindsided like this. Now, serious questions are being asked about who failed to properly research the Congresswoman's background and prepare effective responses. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett's rise was nothing short of explosive. Her office said their phones hadn't stopped ringing with requests from every major news network. Her social media following grew by more than 500,000 in just one day, and political figures nationwide started reaching out to her campaign. More importantly, policy experts began examining the legislation at the center of the debate. The Washington Post published an in-depth analysis largely confirming Crockett's interpretation of the bill and the potential conflicts of interest she had pointed out. 3 days later, Oprah released a carefully worded statement on her social media platforms. Throughout my career I valued truth, growth, and learning. She wrote, my recent discussion with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett has led me to reflect deeply. While I entered that conversation with good intentions, I now realize I didn't fully understand the complexity of the legislation or disclose all relevant connections. I've always believed that when we know better, we do better, and this is my moment to do better. The statement drew mixed reactions. Some praised Winfrey's accountability, while others called it too little, too late. But the most surprising response came from an unexpected direction. A week after the forum, 23 major celebrities and influencers signed an open letter promising to uphold new standards for political commentary. This responsibility and influence pledge required signatories to disclose potential conflicts of interest, consult policy experts before speaking publicly on legislation, and clearly separate personal opinions from factual statements. The lead signator was none other than Oprah Winfrey herself. Sometimes our greatest growth comes from our most difficult moments. Winfrey wrote in the pledge's introduction, "My exchange with Congresswoman Crockett revealed blind spots in how I discuss policy issues. Instead of moving on, I've chosen to learn from it and help set new standards for public commentary." For Jasmine Crockett, the aftermath brought both opportunity and challenge. Her national profile had skyrocketed, but so had scrutiny over her every move. Conservative groups that had once cheered her criticism of Oprah now sought her as an ally, while some progressives worried about her willingness to confront such a powerful figure. Crockett, however, handled the situation with the same composure she showed during the interview on MSNBC's Morning Joe. She clarified her stance. This wasn't about left versus right or me versus men's. It was about a core principle. In policy discussions, accuracy must come before influence. I have deep respect for Oprah's achievements and the barriers she's broken, but my concern was with the misrepresentation of a bill that impacts real people's lives. 2 weeks after the confrontation, subtle but meaningful changes began to appear in the political landscape. Media outlets started including more detailed policy explanations in their reports. Celebrities became more cautious in their statements, often making it clear when they were sharing opinions rather than expertise. Most notably, the controversial bill at the center of the debate was reintroduced with major revisions. The updated version continued to support working families, while removing cuts to essential programs. The corporate tax breaks Crockett had criticized were completely eliminated. The bill's sponsor publicly acknowledged the Winfrey-Crockett exchange for drawing attention to its flaws. Sometimes it takes a public spotlight to expose issues buried in legislative text. Senator Michael Thornton said the revised bill is stronger and fairer because of that conversation. 6 months later, Jasmine Crockett delivered the keynote address at Harvard Kennedy School's Conference on Media, Celebrity, and Political Discourse. Her speech, "Accountability in the Age of Influence," attracted a full house. "The democratization of media has given more people a voice than ever," she said, "but amplification without verification can weaken the very democracy it aims to protect. Whether you're a first-term congresswoman or a billionaire media icon, the standard must remain the same. Claims need evidence, and influence requires responsibility." In the front row sat Oprah Winfrey, listening attentively. The two were later photographed in deep conversation at the reception, both smiling, though neither revealed what was discussed. A year to the day after their clash, they jointly announced a free online course on media literacy and policy analysis designed to help Americans better understand the intersection of news, entertainment, and legislation. Its first module was titled "Bringing Receipts: How to Verify Claims from Any Source." For the public, the Oprah Crockett moment had become part of cultural vocabulary. "Do you have the Crockett receipts for that?" became a catchphrase for asking someone to back up their claims with evidence. High school debate teams analyzed the exchange as a case study in preparation and precision. Most importantly, a new expectation had been set in public discourse. No platform, no matter how beloved, was beyond fact-checking, and no claim, no matter how compelling, was beyond verification. What began as a clash had evolved into something far more meaningful, a recalibration of how influence and accountability coexist in American life. The takeaway was unmistakable. In an era of instant communication and celebrity power, facts still matter. Preparation still matters. And as Jasmine Crockett proved on that stage beside one of the world's most influential women, courage backed by evidence matters most of all. That's the story behind the confrontation that reshaped how celebrity and politics intersect. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell for more analyses of defining political moments. Share in the comments which public figure you think needs a fact check next.